Right now, in Ghana, in Vietnam, in parts of Nigeria and Cambodia, someone is sitting down to a plate of grilled rat, and to them, it's just dinner, not a dare, not a survival story. Dinner. In some regions of West Africa, rat meat sells for more per pound than chicken. In parts of Vietnam, field rat is considered a delicacy, grilled over open flame and served at proper sit-down restaurants, not street stalls people are ashamed of. Right now, an estimated billions of people across dozens of countries eat rat as a completely normal source of protein. And if you're watching this in most Western countries, your entire body probably just recoiled at the idea. So what happened? Why did the rest of the world keep this animal on the menu while an entire hemisphere decided it belongs in the sewer, not on a plate? Here's the question worth sitting with. Rats aren't rare, they aren't hard to raise, and they reproduce faster than almost any mammal on the planet, which on paper makes them one of the most efficient meat sources humans could possibly farm. So why does a huge portion of the world treat the very idea of eating one as disgusting, while billions of other people eat it without a second thought? The first explanation people jump to is disease. Rats carry the plague, they carry parasites. Surely that's reason enough to leave them off every plate on Earth. Except that explanation collapses the moment you actually look at it. The rats linked to historical plague outbreaks were wild rodents scavenging through filth in medieval cities with zero sanitation, nothing like the animal being eaten today. The rats raised for meat across Southeast Asia and West Africa are, in most cases, an entirely different category of animal, deliberately farmed in clean, controlled conditions, fed grain and vegetables, and often a completely different species altogether than the black rat associated with plague. Compare that to chicken, one of the most common sources of salmonella poisoning on the planet, or pork, a well-documented source of viruses that jump to humans. Both sit in supermarkets worldwide without a second thought. The disease excuse doesn't hold up. Something else drew this line, and it isn't biology. The real story starts with which rat we're even talking about, because most people picture the wrong animal entirely. In Vietnam and Cambodia, the rat on the menu is usually the field rat or the bandicoot rat, an animal that spends its entire life in rice paddies, eating grain, roots, and vegetation, never once setting foot near a sewer or a garbage pile. Farmers there have hunted and later farmed this exact animal for generations, the same way farmers elsewhere raise rabbits. It's lean, mild in flavor, and prepared the exact same way you'd season and grill quail or duck. The hunched, gray creature slipping along a subway platform in your imagination is a completely different species living in a completely different environment. And conflating the two is exactly where the disgust gets manufactured. So if the meat itself isn't the problem, the real answer has to be sitting somewhere else. And it is geography, colonialism, and which cultures got to write the rule book on what counts as acceptable food. European colonial powers spread across huge parts of Asia and Africa for centuries, and they brought their own food hierarchies with them, enforcing them as the civilized standard. Beef, pork, and poultry were framed as proper protein. Local staples like rat and other regionally farmed animals got quietly rebranded as primitive, regardless of how widely and comfortably those foods had been eaten for centuries before anyone from Europe ever arrived. That value system didn't disappear when colonial rule ended. It got absorbed into global media, into Western-dominated food criticism, into the very idea of what a normal diet is supposed to look like. And here's where it gets even stranger, because the numbers completely contradict the stigma. In parts of Ghana, rat meat from a species called the grasscutter has become so popular that farmed grasscutter now regularly outsells chicken by weight in certain local markets, commanding a genuine premium price. In India, communities like the Musahar people in Bihar have relied on rat meat as a primary protein source for generations, developing preparation methods passed down as carefully as any other regional cuisine. In Malawi, mice and rats caught during harvest season are sold on skewers along roadside stalls the exact same way you'd see grilled corn sold anywhere else on Earth. None of this is fringe behavior. It's a normal, established, economically significant food source for a genuinely enormous share of the human population, hiding in plain sight behind a single word carrying centuries of manufactured disgust. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it's the strangest twist in the entire story. Some of the harshest critics of eating rat meat have, at some point, unknowingly eaten it anyway. Food fraud investigators in several Asian countries have uncovered cases of rat meat being illegally substituted into cheap street food, sold and marketed as mutton, lamb, or beef, specifically because processed, diced, and spiced rat meat is difficult to visually distinguish from other lean meats. In several documented busts, authorities seized tons of illegally processed rat meat destined for exactly that kind of substitution, which means the disgust response people feel toward this animal has, in real cases, already failed completely, silently, on a plate someone ate without knowing it and enjoyed. If the meat itself was the problem, that shouldn't have been possible. The only thing that changed in those cases was the label. There's also a nutritional angle buried under the disgust reflex. Farmed rat meat is genuinely lean, low in fat compared to red meat, and reasonably high in protein and iron. Agricultural researchers have pointed to farmed rodent species like the grasscutter as a serious candidate for solving protein shortages in parts of the developing world because the animal breeds fast, requires minimal land, and converts feed into meat far more efficiently than cattle ever could. In a world increasingly worried about the environmental cost of large-scale livestock farming, an animal already normalized across huge parts of Africa and Asia might genuinely be part of the answer to a problem the rest of the world is still scrambling to solve. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable layer of all. During actual famines and wartime shortages, even in the West, that disgust has quietly vanished the instant survival was on the line. Rationing records from both world wars describe people across parts of Europe eating rat when nothing else was available, without hesitation once real hunger set in. The taboo, it turns out, isn't some deep evolutionary instinct hardwired into humans. It's a preference that holds firm exactly as long as people have the luxury of choosing something else, and evaporates the moment survival actually depends on it. So the rat sitting on a plate somewhere in Ghana or Vietnam right now isn't a symbol of desperation, and it isn't secretly more dangerous than the chicken on your own plate tonight. It's a lean, farmable, widely eaten protein source that most of the world already accepted centuries ago, wearing a reputation built almost entirely out of which continent happened to be writing the rules. Maybe the real question was never why they eat it. Maybe it's why the rest of us were ever convinced we shouldn't.